So hi, today I'm going to go through how to set up my workstation for IVAO and how to set up X-Plane 12 and TowerView. So I have this checklist that I came up and I'll put this into the comments so that way if anybody wants to use it, they can or modify it or whatever. Whatever you want to do with it, feel free. So the first thing I start OBS because OBS is my suite that I use to record all this. So here it is. I have this set up. I'm kind of overkill here. My desk looks like a 911 console. Um, I have four monitors. One of them is a big like TV screen that's up in the air. And then I have a 24-inch, and then I have two 17-inch monitors. I run what you're looking at here is my 24-inch, and then this is the large. I don't even know how big it is, but it's a TV basically that's suspended, a LCD TV. I put my TowerView on here, and then on this one, I do everything else. So I start that first as administrator because if you don't start it as administrator, it does funky things. That's the best way to explain it. Next thing I do is I check my digital ATIS, which there's this wonderful website called dATIS.cloud with a W in it, .io, and you can select most major airports and pull up what the actual digital ATIS is. ATIS is Automated Terminal Information System, or service, excuse me, where it'll tell you which runways are in use, basic weather information, things like that. Like for here, some airports have one ATIS for everything. The larger ones break it up into separate departure and arrival ones. So like for instance, this departure one, it's coded, but to read it, it'd be Miami departure information Zulu. They rotate every hour letters. It's not consistent with what we have, but we try to follow the real world as much as possible. 0053 Zulu, all aviation time is in Zulu, which is a 24-hour UTC, Universal Time Coordinated. So right now it's 8:22 p.m. here, Eastern Time, and this is valid at 0053 Zulu. So the time right now, I'm going to cheat here, is 1:22. So it was done at 53 after the last hour. So it'd be 7:53 p.m. Eastern is when this was valid. Um, the winds are 110 at 09er knots. So they're out of 110. Think of a compass as 360 degrees. 90 is east, 180 is south. So 110 is about southeast. So they're out of the southeast at 9 miles an hour or knots. Visibility is 10 statute miles. Few clouds at 2,300. Few clouds at 25,000. And the temperature and dew point are given in Celsius. So temperature is 24, dew point is 21 in Celsius. The altimeter is inches of mercury. It's 30.13, but we read it as 3013, or I say 3013 because the phonetic alphabet for air traffic control is a little bit different than, or the pronunciation is a little bit different in the phraseology than regular English. If you listen to real ATC, you'll hear it sometimes, especially if they're new controllers. Some of the older guys, they just say it normal English, like 3013. Um, and then there's some remarks like that's automated weather system, things like that. Then they give what runways are in use. So the departing runway is 8 left, 8 right, 9, and 12, or 1, 2. Um, and then they give some information here. I'm not going to read all this. And then there's a separate one for arrivals that is similar, but it's got some slightly different data. So I checked these, and this is what I put into the ATIS part of the software that I use. So after we check the ATIS, I'm going to configure this item called Artifice, which is the connector. It is put out, oops, can't spell. It is put out by IVAO. It's IVAO connector Artifice. And what this does is this allows X-Plane or whatever flight simulator you're using to be connected to your air traffic control radar console, which is called Aurora. That way you don't have to have two connections. because they get really testy, they meaning the IVAO folks, if you have two connections going from your computer. Like if you had an observer one and an air traffic control one, you can actually get banned for things like that. They give you a warning first, but the reason I know this is because I did it and I didn't know about Artifice. And one of the guys, one of the other controllers, like, hey, you can't do that, but I know what you want to do. This is how you do it. And he told me about this. So this thing's wonderful. The upstream server, I just happen to know this, is worldserver.ivao. Oops, can't spell. Arrow. So that's all you have to do for this, and then minimize it. Then we start X-Plane. I say resume flight because 9 times out of 10, the last time I used X-Plane was as air traffic control, not as a pilot. But if I would use it as a pilot, then I'd have to reconfigure it. So I'm going to go ahead and start X-Plane. I have X-Plane 12. I'm one of the lucky ones, I guess. However, this will work with any flight simulator, well, within reason. It'll work with both versions of X-Plane. It'll work with FSX, Microsoft Flight Simulator. I think it'll work with Flight Gear too. I think, but I'm not 100% sure. But I know at least the two main ones it'll work with. Oh, and Prepared 3D. They that's basically the same as FSX for all intents and purposes. So it'll work with those also, but you need to have a different client, which I'll get to in a minute. So we're going to resume the last flight since I know we were in Miami for the last flight. It's going to be dark out though. I have it set to real world time, real world weather. So try to make it as realistic as possible. I'll give it a minute to start. While it's starting, we're going to start up altitude. We're not going to actually, altitude is the name of the pilot client. It's IVAO pilot client, but the other name of it's altitude. They have a different client for each flight simulator. So this one happens to be for X-Plane. They have another version that's for Microsoft Flight Simulator, and you have to do another step for that. There's another application you have to start. But we'll get into the how to connect it in a minute because connecting is the same way. It's just it needs to know which one it's going to connect to. So we'll go back to let's see, while we're waiting for this. Okay, so that's on, and here we are. So I'm going to move this to the other monitor, the bigger one that I usually use, and we'll switch over to that. There we go. And what I do is, excuse me, it doesn't really matter where you start on the airport or what plane you're in, because what you're going to do is this is only for X-Plane. I'm not sure how to do this in Microsoft Flight Simulator. I know there's a way to do it, but for X-Plane, you're going to hit the letter C, and it puts you into like a drone mode, and then an up arrow to get up a little bit, and then the letters Q and E rotate you to the left and right, respectively. So I'm going to do Q. I'm going to turn around until I see the control tower, because I want this to be as realistic as possible. And there's the control tower right there. So I'm a little high. What I do is first I go into the control tower, so that way I get the right orientation. So I use my left and right arrows to go left and right, up arrow, down arrow to go up and down, Q and E to rotate left and right, and then period moves you forward, comma moves you back. You sometimes have to hit the up arrow a little bit to get into your... You know what? I wonder what's in here. I never went in here. I went into the top one. Nothing. Okay, well, we'll go up a little bit. Now, once you get into the tower, you're actually in here, and you can stay in the tower if you really want it to be realistic, but I found it to be a pain in the neck, especially trying to rotate around and you'd be too close or too far, and you can't really see because all the monitors are blocking. Plus, you have these people in here that are just sitting there doing nothing. Um, it kind of, and it looks like you have Die Hard or something on the TV there. Um, since this really isn't much of a usefulness, I'll actually just go up a little bit. And then this is what I'll use for the tower view. And I start by looking at the terminal, but usually I rotate this around a lot. But it's pretty cool though, because especially in Miami, you can see the cars out on the highway there, and it's fairly realistic. You can also use the mouse to zoom in using the scroll wheel and zoom out. Okay, so now that we got that set up, we're going to go back to the connector or the client, IVAO Pilot Client Altitude. Actually, we're not. We're going to let that sit there. We're not going to connect yet. We have to, I skipped a step, which is sign in to Aurora. So I'm going to look on WebEye here for a second. Make sure nobody signed in as tower. We have somebody signed in as ground control, but nobody's as tower. So I'm going to hop on tower, and then he can do ground control, which actually will work out good because I like it when there's two people doing this stuff. I really like it when there's an approach control or center above us, but there's not, but that's okay.
I just wanted to point out real quick that I wasn't really being observant because, as you can see right at the bottom of the screen where my mouse was, it says KZMA underscore CTR, which means Miami Center. So we did have a Miami Center above us at the time, but I didn't realize that initially. I just wanted to point that out in case anybody else spotted it.
All right, so we're going to start Aurora, which is the air traffic control radar client. Takes a minute to load. And I'm going to open the Miami profile, which for some reason it keeps resetting back to something else, but it gets me my colors I need. And then I'm going to go up here. I'm going to check connect to Artifice so it'll connect to that connector so that way it'll let me connect my flight sim to this. Save it and then connect. Now I'm actually signing in as the tower position. As soon as I see my ATIS letter appear right here, then I'm live and I can start talking to people. So got information 8 alpha. It said something to Zulu on the real one. This usually almost always starts at alpha. Um, we have a comm box. What I'll do is I'll say that we're online. This lets everybody know that we're online. And let's see. Forgot to reset my speakers back to my headphone. Okay. Now that we're signed in, we can sign in to our flight simulator with this. You have to change the server to connector, otherwise you sign into the network. If you sign it on as connector, it connects through Artifice and it doesn't count as a connection against you. But the rest of this doesn't matter. You can call it whatever you want. This, I keep it for my plane that I fly when I fly the flight simulator. So that way I don't have to switch back and forth. I normally fly a Cessna 172. But in this case, this is just for ATC. And I'm going to connect. And if you look on it, on the flight sim up here, it actually will tell you the same message that you see in here. One of the cool things is that if you're tuned to Unicom on here as your primary, which I am, you can hear the Unicom conversations in addition to your conversations that you'll hear through here, through the Aurora, which controls your radio normally. It's kind of nice because if you have a plane that's coming in from a distance and there's no air traffic control above you, they're supposed to call when they're doing certain things on Unicom, and you get to hear it so you know which runway they're coming into and things like that. Because um, normally approach control will clear them for a certain approach, but since I'm tower, I can't clear them for the approach. I can only basically handle them when they're on final or within this area right here, which is my primary area. If they're outside of this, I really can't even talk to them. I'm not supposed to, unless they call me for something. So anyway, so let's get back to the checklist here. So we did this. Now we would start recording. I'm already recording because I'm showing you how to do this, so I wouldn't, but normally I would. Then I check my mic for mute, which I'm doing now. And I know I'm not muted because I see the bars moving on OBS. But I've done that before where I'm calling the aircraft and they're not answering me and they're sending me text messages like, hey, I see you're trying to transmit. I look down and my mute button's on. It happens. To check the mic though, I go into my settings and I go to VHF radio, and this is a local test. Or if I transmit, it doesn't go out, it just stays local.
Check,
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 check.
check,
One,
one,
two,
two,
three.
three. So as long as I hear myself on that, I'm good. Let's see what's next here. Configure ATIS. So I go into ATIS, make sure that this, excuse me, this reflects what was on the dATIS. I know it does because it hasn't changed, so I'm keeping it the same. Otherwise, I'd hit send and it would change the letter. The next thing I would do is configure the airport configuration. So in here, if I go to airports and I go to KMIA, which is this one, I look here and as you can see, there's no extensions out or anything around the airport. So it automatically adds these, but you can override them. If, let's say, sometimes it'll add the wrong runways as your preferred runways. You can override that. But for departures and arrivals, I usually check the ones that are active. And if you can see here on the left, it's adding the centerline extensions out. Each one of these ticks is a mile. The big tick here is 5 miles. The big tick here is 10 miles. That way you can tell how far out they are. Like for instance, if you have a plane that you're going to take off, there's usually a general rule of thumb. If the aircraft is within 2 miles landing, you don't have another plane on that runway. You tell them to hold short or whatever. Um, so anyway, that's how this part's set up. Once you're done with this, configure the runway winds and reposition on the screen. So back to here, this W column is the winds, and it adds them right here. And then basically I just take this and drag it down so I could see. So it'll tell you um, basically what the winds are. So 124 at 6, 120 at 6, because the end of the runways are slightly different. Generally, though, I use the main one here just because it's easier, unless there's like a significant difference in speed more than anything else. Um, but it kind of gets you the idea. So because these are real time, this is only updated. These two are only updated like every so often. All right, so we'll go to the next thing here. Send the online ATC message. I already did that. That's where you go to here and you do online, and it lets everybody know you're online. Then I announce the current ATIS and altimeter to everybody because you're supposed to do the altimeter every half hour, but I do the ATIS whenever it changes. Whenever I see that letter change, I re-announce it. At the beginning, I announce it. So I'm going to announce it. Intentional aircraft information alpha is current. Miami altimeter tree 01 tree. Altimeter's right here. Actually, it's right here too, in both places. There's nobody here within my range listening to me right now, so there's nobody to answer it, but I do it anyway, just in case. Um, check and assume any current traffic. There is none. Break out the arrival and departure flight strip bays. So this is the flight strip. Um, whichever aircraft, like this one isn't mine, but I can click on it and see, and it'll populate the flight strip, and it tells me a lot of things here, like it'll tell me where the aircraft's going to. In this case, this aircraft is going to Tulsa, Oklahoma. It's Sky Columbia 006 is the flight number. It is a Boeing 747-400. That's Boeing 744. H signifies it's a heavy aircraft for what do you call it? Wake turbulence. So what that means, number one, it it lets the other aircraft know that they're a heavy aircraft and they need to kind of stay away from it, or might get thrown around. But more importantly, when they're on the ground, for landing and takeoff purposes, you have to space a little bit more with other aircraft based on that. And there's other things like the route here. So it's taking the HROC 2 departure, smells transition, and then Q116 is the airway, direct to this waypoint, direct to Tulsa, and then direct to the airport. Um, there's a lot of configuration that's done on there. When I hit list, there's three panels that drop down, or three bays. There's the departure bay, the arrival bay, and the overflight bay. Overflight basically doesn't necessarily mean that they're flying right over you. It means they're within your visibility area. I think if I zoom in, that goes away, I think, maybe. No, I guess not. Um, anyway, I guess because they're within my visible area, I can see them. Right now, there's nothing coming in and nothing going out, so there's nothing there. But I break these lists out, and what I do is I hit when I hit list, it drops them down, and then I use these buttons here to separate out the departure, arrival, and overflight. So departure and arrival, those end up on the other monitor, which I'll flip to here at the top here. Now, if I click on the flight sim, they making a liar out of me. Well, they sometimes go away. I guess they're not now. Oh, there we go. Okay, see, they go away. And then all I have to do is go back to the main radar screen and click on them, and then they appear again. Um, those would show the flight strips for whatever is arriving or departing out of the airport, respectively. And then going back to here, I break this one out too, and it just shows up as a set, but I keep it on the separate monitor. It's more informative. The other two really help me because I can tell who's coming and who's going. This is just somebody that's flying over us or around us. The only time that's good is if I'm really, really busy and I see this radar blip come out of nowhere. I mean, usually I look at the altitude and I can tell, but I can go to the strip, and if it's on the overfly strip, I know it's not mine. It's just let it go because it's too high outside of my area usually if it's flying right over us or it's around us. And then I collapse the list again. Also, I have an ATC window. These are other ATCs. Oh, cool. We do have Miami Center. So we have a Miami Center tonight. They must have just signed on. Yep, here they are. Miami Center. So we have departure control now, or approach control, because Miami Center covers that in addition to center activities like en route traffic. Um, got a plane coming down from Chicago O'Hare. Let's see what their ETA is. They're still probably an hour away, I imagine. WebEye's been having a problem today. Certain things. All right, well, we'll go back to the checklist. Start 30-minute timers. So we got to start the clock. We're supposed to announce the altimeter every 30 minutes. So I have a clock set up for that. And then have fun. So here we go. So got about 40 minutes until they come into our area to land. It's American 2323. They are a it's interesting, B-38. Oh, it's a Boeing 737 MAX. That's what that is. I didn't recognize the code, but that's what kind of plane that is. So that's pretty much it. So now we got, move these things back off because I don't need them on here. So when a plane is getting ready for departure, it'll pop up on the radar here. Ground control will handle it first and give them the clearance and the taxi route to the runway. If there is no ground control, then the tower does it. And then me being tower, once they get to the runway and in position, I'll go ahead and clear them to take off. And then I'll hand them over to the center or approach control, whichever one happens to be there. Or I just tell them to go to Unicom if neither's there. And then conversely, they usually don't contact me, the airplanes, until they're on final, which is on this route here. If there's no center or approach control, they know to do it usually when they get within 5 to 10 miles of the runway. If there is approach control or center, they will tell them contact the tower 118.3, which is the frequency for here. Obviously, other airports are different. In real life, Miami has two towers. They have one for the north runways, and then they have the one for 12 or 1, 2, and 09 are the other tower. But of course, in real life, there's planes coming in constantly, 24 hours a day, just about. So we don't have that here, unfortunately. I wish we did. But that's it. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments below. Um, Otherwise, we'll talk to you next time. Take care. Bye.